To the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad that you landed with us in a field here with a UFO to stay curious. And I'm here with Ken Verderame. Hey, Ken.
Hey, Mark.
Ken is somewhat of a UFO expert. After all, he, quote, worked at Area 51. He's a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, retired. He trained astronauts, a very elaborate program to learn from NASA how to train astronauts. But more importantly, he's a good friend of mine, part of our Brevard Astronomical Society Club of Stargazers here. So how are you today?
Very good. Just trying to stay dry in our typical afternoon thunderstorms we get.
Yes, we had an afternoon thunderstorm, knocked us off there. We're going to reboot everything here. So we've got a terrific program here. We're going to have Ken follow up on the NASA committee that meant to investigate unidentified anomalous phenomenon, and something that a stargazer has always got a few books about. And I gave you a program about it last Wednesday after I watched the 4-hour presentation. And as a UFO not enthusiast, that as far as I want to know what they are, I was kind of a sycophant in their buying into this 16-person committee of all the astronomer on there. They had oceanographers. They had people from all disciplines, including Scott Kelly, the astronaut, on there. And Ken's going to be here to kind of maybe debunk a little bit about this approach. In fact, you got some pretty strong opinions about it.
Yeah, I was somewhat disappointed. I wish I could say I was surprised at what, because I watched the entire thing too. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm having worked at NASA for as many years as I did. As great an organization as NASA is, they have a very structured approach and way of doing things, and they typically don't like to change. I mean, it needs to be something really monumental before they're going to make significant changes. And what I witnessed from the, this last public forum for their committee is kind of more of that approach. And we'll get into some specifics here.
Oh, absolutely. But Ken definitely thinks they're going in the wrong direction, where I was kind of like, well, NASA's the right person to do this, maybe not Department of Defense, which is freaked out that we do have these real anomalies in our airspace, correct?
Yes.
As what, 30-some years in the Air Force, flying 40 different aircraft and so forth. You know that there might not be just a security, but a safety problem with these things?
I mean, part of the, one of the questions I get asked most often is, why is there all this secrecy around what is going on here? Why does the government keep secrets? Why won't the DoD tell us what's going on, right? Why was the UAP task force classified, and on and on and on? And what I got to remind people is that, what's been observed by not just civilians, but by lots of military and other government people over the years, those things are in our airspace. And the people responsible for protecting our airspace, right, the Department of Defense, they will admit to you that, they don't know their origin, so they don't know where they come from. They don't know who's operating them, or are they operating them, or are they being operated by intelligence inside them? And those two things are bad enough, but then when you add the fact that they display capabilities that we can't duplicate in a lot of cases, you add those three things up and you get literally the very definition of threat to national security.
My.
And as soon as that happens, it gets classified. That's why they're doing that.
Well, here's a man who knows a lot of classified things, okay? I don't even ask him anything under the stars as we've been stargazing buddies, because I wouldn't want him to kill me if he accidentally told me something. But Ken, you're always good at just taking it to the enough information, not to tease us, but you're very confident of what you do tell us. And are you curious enough, folks, now to hear what he has to say about this committee and why he's not satisfied with it? First off, we're going to just thank our GoHistoryTravel.org friends for supporting the American Space Museum financially, specifically our Stay Curious program. Here's the little meme I put out for you today to advertise our program today. And this is a piece of artwork we're going to revisit here in a minute by Paul Calley, the great Chris Calley's son. Well, Paul Calley's great. Chris, you're just no. Chris is good too. He's a space artist, and we've been bragging about him for a long time. There you are, a few 24 hours ago, Ken. And what kind of airplane did you just get out of there?
So that's an F-16 in the background, and so just
F-16. Ooh, that's a bad.
Yeah, and so what that is, believe it or not, is a still image taken from a video clip, and the video is an intro I was doing for trying to get on the TV show.
Survivor?
Survivor.
Oh, you're a Survivor. Marty's tried to get on Survivor.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of 3-minute videos I did to try to get on that show. What's interesting is I applied to other shows as well. And if you remember the TV show with the briefcases.
Oh yeah, Mary. Howie
Mandel.
I just remember those girls holding what briefcases?
So
all I saw was 25 women and glasses up.
I applied for that show as well.
Briefcases. Did you?
I used the same video clip. I just changed the intro.
Okay.
Right? Survivor never even acknowledged I existed. I actually was a finalist for that other show. I mean, it just shows you never know what they're looking for. All the shows are different.
Yeah.
And one video clip gets nowhere, and the other one gets me as a contestant finalist.
Well, my co-producer Marty Winkle, we hadn't said hi to you, Marty, but I know you also auditioned, so to speak, for Survivor. Hi, Marty.
I applied, auditioned, got to the quarterfinals,
Nice.
and then got turned down.
Better than me, that's for sure. I never even got acknowledged once.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I applied literally like 10 seasons in a row. I mean,
Who was the astronaut that was on Survivor and made it to like the last 4? Dan. Oh God! Every time I see him, I think of he's tall, big smile. Someone out there will remind me about it up there. So, well, we certainly digress from UFOs, though. Yeah, Marty.
Yeah, he was selected the time I applied, and I think that's why I got turned down.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, and Survivor's still going strong, incredibly enough. One of those reality show things there. Well, there's a little thing I didn't know about you, Ken. Had to get you on Stay Curious to get that out of you. But we're here to talk about 1966, the Saturday Evening Post. Boy, I hadn't said those words in a long time. Was one of the oversized photojournalism papers out there, new magazines with Life and Look. Look was the best photojournalism one out there. And it had a story in 1966, Are Flying Saucers Real? And that is artwork by Paul Calley, who's famous for his Apollo stamp of Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon and so forth. Now, we're looking at 2023, okay? 57 years later, we're still asking the same question, Ken. Are unidentified anomalous phenomenon real? And they admitted, as we are going to talk about now, a week ago, this 16-member group of all-star people, investigators supposedly, they're tasked not to explain what these phenomena are, just to collect the data and present it to the public. The background of this is almost 70 years of UFOs being reported, and that database, basically NASA said, we don't care about that. We're going to create our own database. So what for the Blue Book, Project Blue Book that the great Alan Hynek, astronomer from Northwestern, pioneered in the 60s and so on and so forth. So, Ken, I'm going to turn you loose here in a minute, but I've seen a few UFOs myself, buddy, up at Bays Mountain Park in Kingsport, Tennessee. And we're amateur astronomers. We're always seeing things in the sky like that, right?
absolutely.
No, we're not.
More than others, I think, see things up in the sky.
Exactly. We've spent hundreds of hours under the sky. And I have seen two things that puzzled me. But we won't talk about that.
Actually, the neatest thing, the real-time live thing I ever saw when I was using my telescope was in my backyard. It was here. I saw what appeared to be, it was orange, and it appeared to be, flaming or burning. and it was moving across the sky from north. It was coming from the northwest, and it was slowly tracking across the sky. And I'm looking at it, going, "What am I looking at?" And as it moved across the sky, I saw a second object following behind it in the same path. And at the time, I'm like, okay, it's not an aircraft or anything, because it's certainly not moving like that. But it's some kind of object. And then as I ran back in to get a camera to try to take some quick video, it finally dawned on me what it probably was. It was probably the reentry of some space junk. That's what and by the time I got back out, both the pieces had passed overhead. So the next day I went back in, and there's a website you can get on that you can go and look and see when every piece of space junk is due to re-enter, where it, and sure enough, there was 2 pieces of an old either Russian or Chinese satellite that were due to re-enter that previous night that should have been visible on the East Coast. And that's exactly what it was. A pretty interesting sight to see in the dark, though. But
Well, planet Venus is right now bright in the sky, and when it gets low, particularly if you got a western drive, it can look like something anomalous coming at you there. But yeah, our point is we know, each of us know several hundred people in our lives that have spent hours looking at the beautiful canopy of stars under us, and I don't know anybody that's really has something that blew their minds that they couldn't explain.
The thing to remember, or that people should realize, is when you have someone like us and military and things who have spent many years either professionally trained or not, but looking at the sky and objects that fly and things like that, you learn what looks like an object versus a natural phenomena. It's sometimes hard to describe to a layman who's maybe not familiar, but to someone who's done it, it's pretty obvious if it's an object or a natural phenomenon. So when you hear these debunkers try to say, well, it's not a real object, it's a phenomenon, you're like, no, you're literally discounting the facts. You may not know what the object was, but it was an actual object maneuvering in the sky. I mean, that was clear.
Well, there we got Ken's credentials up there a little bit. Ken, what are you most proud of up there of this blue ribbon list of things that any of us would love to do just half of those things?
I tell you what, the X40 stuff up there, and so if most people will know that program.
The director of the known as the X-37.
Yeah. So everybody's probably right now, particularly if you're around here, you're familiar with the NASA's X-37, or not NASA.
The space plane, yeah.
Right.
It's a part, or 2 of them, supposedly. They haven't launched one in a couple of months.
Yeah, well, they don't need to. It flies for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, they landed one, yeah.
What most people don't know is that vehicle was previously known as the X-40. It was an Air Force classified program, and I ran it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm one of the people, quite frankly, responsible for bringing that. My team not only designed, developed, we executed the first atmospheric flight test of that vehicle, and the team successfully did an autonomous approach and landing of a hypersonic outer mode line vehicle, the first time literally in the history of aviation that had been done. We won the National Rotary Space Achievement Award that year for that.
Awesome.
Cover of Aviation Week, all that good stuff. And but many things happened. That was the late 90s, right? And X-37, as you all know it today, has only been flying for a few years. So a lot went on, and I could...
Can't talk about that.
Well, you could write a book about what happened to get from that point back in the 90s, when it was a classified program and no one knew what we were doing, to today, where everybody's heard of the X-37. It's even been in some movies.
That's right.
So,
and we only hear it when it comes back from space.
Right.
I believe we're told there's 2 of them. They're in one of the hangars of the VAB, beside the VAB that house the shuttle garages.
They got a big sign on. In fact, when I got invited, Pam Elroy, the current NASA deputy administrator, she's a classmate of mine from test pilot school. We suffered through test pilot school together. Well, she sent me an invite to the Artemis launch. We went, and as a guest of the deputy administrator, we went on with the group that went over to over at the VAB, and so while we're out there on the balcony waiting, you can see the OSB hangars, and there's, big thing says X-37. And I took a whole bunch of pictures, said, hey, I know what that is.
That's a mini shuttle that could fit in the shuttle cargo bay that they've kept one of them up for over 750 days.
In fact, I have some video. One of the things we were doing that no one knows about, it's not a classified fact, but one of the things we were doing is after the atmospheric flight test, we needed to go and do a space flight test. That was the next step. The Air Force had told me they weren't going to give me a Delta rocket to do it, and so figure out some other way. Well, I knew NASA was interested as in the vehicle as a potential at that time in the 90s crew rescue vehicle for station, and so we were doing a lot of work with them. We had actually manifested that vehicle on an upcoming shuttle flight a couple years later, and we were going to go do a combined NASA Air Force mission. We were going to take the vehicle happened to fit in the shuttle cargo bay.
Wow.
We were going to go do a combined NASA Air Force mission, and so we needed to prove that you could put the vehicle in the shuttle bay and do all those kinds of EVA activities, and that meant we needed to get into the NBL. And so we spent a week in the NBL doing testing with astronauts, doing EVAs with the vehicle. And I've got the only video ever of that week-long testing we did of it's VHS. I probably need to get it.
I'd love to see that sometime. Absolutely. Do a day-curious program off of that. But yeah, this is one of our spy versus spy things going on there. And so Ken tells you that story. Are you going to believe him when he's going to tell you now about the UAPs? I know I am. When they formed this committee here, let's get to the meat of our program today here. The idea was that NASA leads the search for life, of course, interplanetary spacecraft. So they want to apply rigorous methodology to UAPs as we search for life in our solar system. And only good and amazing discoveries will resort. Now, this group of 16 highly regarded people in their respective industries claim that NASA is not hiding anything. But they really were important to point out that cultural barriers need to be taken down and no stigma attached to the researchers. As we know that UFO conspiracy theories and so forth, who hasn't watched ancient astronauts on TV and those sort of things to wonder about really what's going on, and Ken's going to tell us here in a second. This committee pointed out that why they're the ones to funnel the information to us naive public out there is because, one, NASA has a strong public trust. The second point, Ken, is the international cooperation that NASA has, of course. 3 is that the interdisciplinary teams that NASA can bring together, like oceanographers working with astronomers, that might not sound like a match, but maybe one of them's got some instruments that can accumulate data that they never thought of. And then 4th and final is that NASA is good at long-term focusing and going to meet their goal, as in the Apollo program and any kind of spacecraft that's put in, like Cassini, 5 years on the drawing board and 5 years to build it and then launch it type of thing. So with that set up there, Ken, what they discounted, this committee, was one, UFO investigators, the 70 years that people have been researching things, they're not scientific, they're not reliable, they're biased, they have very few witness accounts, and the data is calibrated from usually one source, like a smartphone. So, Ken, you watched it just like I did. That was sort of my impression as a naive public astronomer out there. Is like, well, let them get a stab at it, because we do have, as you're going to see in Ken's presentation here, anomalous things that we have to figure out what they are. So, Ken, again, you said you were a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, so it's important as we go through this discussion to realize, what they were asked to do and what they're not asked to do. Okay, and so this first slide I want to put up, I want you to, as you're hearing me discuss this, I want you to keep these 3 rules in the back of your mind, because for better or worse, you're going to see some of this on display with the NASA team, which I think is unfortunate. Either on purpose or not on purpose, but I think and I'll try to point it out. So if you've been involved in the world of ufology and UFO research, even at any level at all, you're familiar with what we call the 3 golden rules of debunkers. Okay, so the first rule is, of course, don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up. Okay, you're going to see that, unfortunately, with the NASA team, I think, here, and I'll point that out. Number 2, what the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them. Okay, you're going to see some of that as well in how they're approaching this particular study. Number 2 is a big one, right? The debunker always, if you're not smart enough to know some of the details that disprove what they're going to tell you, they're not going to tell you that. Well, that's completely erroneous behavior, but they do it all the time. And then the last one, and if you can't attack the data, attack the messenger. And believe it or not, you're actually going to see that, and I'm going to talk about that specific case that was brought up during 3 hours as well, which I thought was a little unfortunate, but I know why they were doing it. So keep that in mind as we're going.
All right.
All right, so what actually happened, right? So back on the 31st, the NASA Independent Study Team, they hold their public forum, right, on categorizing and evaluating the data for what they call now unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs. So the purpose, as stated through the group, was they're going to do their final deliberation before the agency's independent study team actually published their report this summer. So this is the last chance for them to all get together, and also for the public in the form of NASA's stated mission of transparency, to let the public see exactly what they were doing. And then there was actually a form at the end for people to ask questions. Okay, so it's important to understand what this study team's objectives are and what there are not as we frame this discussion, right? And so I'm just going to read you literally what NASA says the team's objective is, right? It's outlining how to evaluate and study UAP by using data, technology, and tools of science, and it is a NASA priority. It is not a review or assessment of previously unidentified observations. That's important. The report will inform NASA on what possible data could be collected in future to shed light on the nature and origin of UAP. Absolutely nothing wrong with this objective for this team. Okay, I get it that they were not asked to go evaluate current data. Quite frankly, not necessarily the first step. The first step is what they're doing is to figure out how do we collect data and then go and analyze that. So I don't have any particular problem with the stated objective. My issues are more with how they approached that objective. All right, let's go to the next slide. So these are actual quotes that if you listened to the 3 hours, you heard them say, right? Limited amount of high quality data. The use of civilian unclassified data. Unsystematic, using unsophisticated instruments, not suited for data collection, and we need high quality data. All those things, right, they went over and over again, basically saying that, yeah, you know, we may have there may be 70 years of data, but none of it is really up to the standards of NASA, and therefore it's not of any value. Well, I will tell you that that's quite frankly ridiculous. There is so much, and so, you know, the term high quality is an interesting one, right? What's your definition of high quality? NASA will, this study penny tells you that high quality is only how they define it with their particular scientific instruments that have been calibrated in very specific ways and nothing else. Okay, that's certainly an approach to doing this, but to discount every other method of data collection and all the data that's been collected by these other sources to say that it has no value, I think is disingenuous. Okay, you know, they said we're using only civilian unclassified data. That's unfortunate, because that, if that's really what you're going to do, you're missing out on a lot, you know, a wide variety of very sophisticated, very calibrated data that you could use to help understand what's going on. And I can tell you that on DoD side, that's what we do.
Okay.
While the use of civilian data is nice, we have lots of classified data systems that collect data on this phenomenon and have for many years. You're familiar with Lou Elizondo. I think most people are by now, right? The previous head of ATIP, back in 2017. He gets interviewed all the time on this topic. And one of the things that was interesting a couple of years ago, someone asked him in one of his interviews, they said, I don't get it. You got all these, we got millions of cell phones around the world. Everybody can take photographs, yet all we ever see are these fuzzy images and blurry, and I don't get it. This can't be real. How come we don't have anything that's really of high quality? And he kind of sat there and Lou's very, deliberate. He doesn't answer off the cuff at anything. And he took almost 30 seconds before he came up with an answer. And he finally looked at the guy and he said, the things you have been seeing that have been public released, number one, are the poorest quality data we have about this phenomenon. Okay? And number two, we know exactly what these things look like. And then he paused and he said, we have lots of high quality video, high definition data on these objects. We know exactly what they look like. We don't know where they're from. We don't know who operates them. We don't know how they do what they do, but we know exactly what they look like. So don't let anybody tell you that we don't have any high quality data. We have plenty of high quality data. Okay? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. All right. So with that as a background, let's keep going here with
70 years of data. And of course, during that span, how we acquire data, these machines have changed, via AKA film to digital era and so forth. But it was the best at the time and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And DOD and FAA, whatever, using the same quality stuff, but maybe a little better.
I mean,
to discount it all is just absurd.
Right. Just because you didn't have a interplanetary probe quality instrument pointed at one of these objects and collected the data from that doesn't mean you should discount the data as being non-useful and non-viable. That doesn't, as a scientist, that doesn't make any sense. What that tells me is you already have, rule number one. My mind is made up already. Don't confuse me with the facts. You're not a real scientist, right? A true scientist doesn't presuppose the answer. You go look at a phenomena, you observe it. From what you observe, you make a hypothesis, and then you go out and you try to collect information, and then you try to see if your hypothesis is correct through a combination of observation and experimentation. And then if it's not, you go and revise your hypothesis or your theory, you go over again. That's the scientific method. That's not what these guys said to do. They just said, throw out all the data, we'll give you some new ideas about some new instruments, and then we'll start from ground zero. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, here is a subtle but very real transformation is going on, says Ken.
So this really bothered me, and I've only come to this kind of revelation in the last couple of days, but I think it's really important to think about it.
I agree. I think this is a part of their strategy.
Absolutely. So if you think about this, right, first we have UFOs, unidentified flying objects. That was what this phenomenon had been called for the better part of 70 years. Then we moved into the world of UAPs. DOD, when they stood up their classified programs a few years ago, they called them unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay, fine. It may not, you went from a object that's flying, which to me denotes some kind of machine, not a, right? Natural phenomena don't fly.
Right.
Things, objects fly. Well, that to me means that something created that object in the world of UFOs. We go to unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay, a little more subtle, you kind of get away from it, but you're still talking about things in the air, and it's an unidentified phenomenon that's in the air. Not necessarily a natural phenomenon, but a thing, and so you're still okay. Now what we've got is we've changed it to unidentified anomalous phenomena. Well, what does that mean? That means anything is possible. Literally, right? We've gone from flying objects to in the air things to now anything that is unidentifiable is fair game. Well, that takes us all the way back to Blue Book, and now it's swamp gas. Swamp gas is an anomalous phenomena.
Yeah, it is.
when you see a formation of lenticular clouds that form the space that look like a cigar and could be a spaceship, that's an anomalous phenomenon.
Ring around the moon.
Also, every one of those things are anomalous phenomena. Anomalous phenomena encompasses the entire universe, literally, of things we don't currently understand. It's a subtle, but I think very real, and I will tell you, I know this is kind of conspiratorial, but I think it's a deliberate attempt to have the public slowly walk away from this idea that it's a flying object, and you connect a flying object with something that an intelligent,
Controlled by something.
something built that. It's not a natural phenomena, it's an object, it's a physical object flying in the airspace.
Ignore the little green man behind the curtain there.
And that's my favorite saying in the world of mythology, right? If you're old enough to remember the Wizard of Oz, right? You remember the phrase,
I am.
ignore the little man behind it. I think that's literally what, either intentionally or not, what's going on here is they're trying to get the public to not pay attention to the core thing here, which I think is the fact that you have actual physical objects that are maneuvering, flying in our airspace. Don't ever lose sight of that, no matter what anybody tells you.
Well, going, Ken, from object to phenomenon, object to me, and I not looked up the definition, but object to me is solid, something I can hold, something you can control or something.
Right.
Where phenomenon, like you said, can be the swamp gas. We see a lot of astronomical phenomenon
It's a
that
natural
people couldn't explain. Good Lord, we know the story. Christopher Columbus supposedly saved his life because he predicted a lunar eclipse of the moon and made the moon go from full moon to black. But we know that what that phenomenon is today, but back then they didn't. So
so you're gonna and so that brings us. That's a good segue to the next part here.
Yeah, we were going to look at a couple of slides that I took screen grabs off of that I thought was kind of baffling with BS.
So I'm going to put my glass on here. So
could that be?
Yeah. So what this is
Recorded from the aircraft carrier USS Theodore Roosevelt in 2015. Right. Very well-known sighting.
Yeah. So this is the Commander Fravor video, and what was going on here is this was an attempt by one of the panel members to demonstrate that even though you have a highly experienced military aviator who's reporting on the phenomena, right, that at some level he doesn't understand what his instruments are telling him, and the fact that he says the object was moving fairly quickly, this person on the panel says that by going through all this information, you can see that the object was only going 40 miles an hour, and therefore one more demonstration that even experienced people don't necessarily can be fooled. And so stop looking behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's a natural phenomena. There's nothing to see here. It's not really objects controlled or not controlled by us or the Russians or other intelligent entities. It's just a natural phenomena. Don't worry about it. That's what this entire chart, to me, was trying to do, and I was very disappointed that they decided to take that approach. Because here's the point. Let's say, and I haven't done the analysis that he did. I guess I could go through that and see if I buy it. But let's say everything is accurate, and it turns out that object, the Tic Tac, was only going 40 miles an hour.
Maybe a catamaran on the water.
No. I mean,
it is in the air. Okay.
No. He claims that his whole point of this analysis was that the object was only going 40 miles an hour. When Fravor and those guys were talking, you could hear him say how fast it's going.
The illusion was that the plane recording it was creating the illusion of speed.
And I agree. The illusion from the video looks like it's going very, very fast. But my rebuttal to that is, so what? The speed is not the speed is not the issue. It doesn't matter if the Tic Tac was going 40 miles an hour or 400. The issue was you have this object maneuvering by itself, no visible means of propulsion, doing things that we don't necessarily know how to do, regardless of how fast it happened to be going at this particular incident. Okay? And here's the other part of that. Again, this goes back to if the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them.
Right.
Well, why didn't this gentleman during the committee talk about the fact that this object, after they lost it on the FLIR and they lost track of it and it sped away, he got called by the Aegis cruiser and he says, "Sir, you're not going to believe this. The Tic Tac is at your cap." Okay. Now, for those of you who don't understand what just transpired there,
Yeah, I remember.
that is something you need to really pay attention to, because the cap is a point in space that is known only to the pilot in his airplane. It's in his data system, and it's known to the people on the Aegis cruiser. And it was, by the way, you can fact check me, I think it was like 60 miles away from his current position where his cap was.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The Tic Tac showed up at his tack, like his cap. "I'm waiting for you. Come and see me." Not only do I know where your tack is, I got there essentially instantaneously. Within less than 10 seconds, he got there, and he's sitting there waiting. So how did the Tic Tac know where the cap was? I only know two ways
In space.
to do that. You read Commander Fravor's mind, probably not what happened,
Right.
or you got into his weapon system, into this F-18, into his data system, and you pull the coordinates out of it because the coordinates are in his data system, and now you have the GPS coordinates, and now you decide to go there and wait for Commander Fravor to show up.
Gosh.
Okay? Why didn't the committee talk about that piece of information?
Right.
All they talked about is, it was only going 40 miles an hour, so therefore you can discount these kinds of
That's
observations from experienced people. BS.
Yeah,
That's definitely BS.
I didn't make that connection. I've known that story. I've heard you say that before. An amazing. This is not a very huge object. Well, what size object do we think this is?
He said it was about 20 or 30. It was pretty small. 20.
Yeah, that's what I thought, 30 to feet or
right.
something like that.
Right.
But Ken, you said that you have, I'm not going to say you've seen them, but you say, you showed me like a yardstick. We know what these things look like, high resolution, down to a yardstick. And we're going to see in a minute why what they don't have that's driving everybody nuts is what they are. So,
All right, let's keep going.
all right. One thing that they tried to baffle us with, I guess they did a pretty good job, was showing, for me, was to show all these charts and maps of how the FAA's aviation system is 6,000 planes a day, and all of the weather balloons. What are there? 90 weather balloons a day released in the country,
That's what they claim.
morning, and 90 at night, and maybe 1,500 around the world. That they got everything covered as far as line of sight, radar, and everything up to 10,000 feet. Why would they want to impress upon us this?
Well, again, this to me was another attempt to try to demonstrate that there's nothing to see here, that what people...
Keep moving along the way.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here. Keep going down the road.
That's right. What people are reporting, whether they're trained professional observers or lay people, are typically easily explainable things that are everyday occurrences, because we got lots of stuff in the atmosphere, we got lots of planes, we got lots of stuff, and so again, it's not that extraordinary or that interesting. Well, talk to any real UFO researcher, and they'll tell you 97%-ish of all UFO reported sightings are easily explainable as regular phenomena. Nobody says that that's not a fact in ufology. It's the 2 to 3% that are unexplained that you need to focus on, and it appears our friends in this committee are not willing to do that. They want to focus on the 97% that we've already admitted. We already know that those are regular phenomena. I don't care about those.
Venus, International Space Station, reported every day as UFOs there. That's well. Here's your takeaway, Ken.
All right, so let's get into let me get this here. So I'm going to give you what my impressions after slogging through the 3 or 4 hours of listening to these guys. So number one, several panel members, most maybe, I don't know, clearly have, in my mind, already made up their mind that the phenomena cannot have any extraterrestrial origin. In fact, one of the first things they said, I thought it was the woman who was the head of science and technology for NASA as an associate administrator, she said, quote, we have found no evidence of extraterrestrial origin for this phenomenon. I'm like, oh, well, I guess the study's over then. So much for being a scientist.
Yeah,
and
right.
keeping an open mind. You've already decided that one possibility is no longer possible.
They said that 3 or 4
Oh,
times,
yeah.
different people.
Okay, so next, their approach, right, is to use methods for answering questions about the natural world, not about how to solve problems associated with intelligent living entities. This is a critical thing I want you to think about when you listen to what they've said. Okay, their entire approach was focused on the fact that they've already concluded these are essentially natural phenomena in one form or another, and we're going to use our time-proven scientific method for studying the natural world and explaining natural phenomena. Well, that's all well and good, except that if these are not natural phenomena, your approach will not work. Number 3, they don't appear to have any interest in analyzing what I would classify as mountains of currently available data, having already discounted it, right, as unsystematic, uncalibrated, and ill-suited. They basically said that all data collected to date is not worth anything, even though we know for a fact that the military has plenty of data using what I can assure you, having used many of those systems, is the most sophisticated instrumentation we have,
face of the earth.
including NASA, right? I'm sorry, but DOD has capabilities that are above NASA's as far as sensor capabilities to collect information on phenomena, whether they're intelligently controlled or natural phenomena. And then lastly, their goal appears to be to recommend using the classic scientific method that we talked about to eventually explain what they believe to be nothing more than new or novel natural phenomena and nothing else. All right, so that's what I think is going on. Now, if I were in charge of this committee, which I know no one's ever going to put me in charge of this committee, which is fine, what do I think they actually ought to be doing to help really address and further, move the ball along on this real phenomenon? I think that they should outline an approach using appropriate methods and sensors to capture data that can be analyzed so as to determine what physical phenomena is occurring. Speeds, accelerations, propulsion methods, etc. There's plenty of sensors and equipment we have that can capture that kind of physical data, right? I mean, radars is the simplest unclassified thing that captures that kind of information that is undeniable, right? When a radar operator catches a blip on a radar, it's 2 possibilities. The radar's got a glitch or it's a real object. It's not that difficult to go and figure out if your radar's operating correctly. It's the first thing they do. And in fact, our friends on the Aegis cruiser during the Nimitz encounter back in 2004, that was the first thing they did. The chief had them run an entire diagnostic sweep of all their equipment because they're like, what is all this stuff? We've seen hundreds of them. They came back and said, sorry, boss, our equipment's working perfectly. And they said, uh-oh, this stuff is real, okay? So that is what I think they ought to be doing. And then secondly, they should recommend, and this is really the key of it, I think they should recommend the formation of a team trained in the ability to discover the truth from what I call uncooperative targets, right? And we're talking about things like forensic scientists, criminal detectives, along with physicists, aerospace engineers, and propulsion engineers. And the reason you want to do that is, scientists, these kind of panel members are used to collecting data, analyzing it, and making conclusions about things that are cooperative. Okay? Well, that's not what we have here. If these things do have a non-natural phenomenon origin, if they're other intelligent beings, if they're extraterrestrial, they're clearly non-cooperative. Otherwise, they would have showed themselves 70 years ago. Well, you need, in that case, if you really want to discover, if you want to have any hope of discovering what's actually going on, you need people trained in that art. Well, who are those people? Those are forensic scientists. Those are detectives, people who spend their lives. They don't necessarily have a PhD in aerospace engineering, and they're not physicists like that panel, but that's fine. You got plenty of those people to help with the physics and the math and the science. But you need someone who's skilled and spent their life learning how to figure out what's going on from someone or something that doesn't want to tell you what they're up to doing. FBI, it comes to mind.
Yeah.
Those kinds of individuals think differently than scientists trying to solve a problem. And I think if you put a team together that leverages both, you put those people in cooperation with the people that do have the hard science and the physics background, who can make sense of the specific science going on here when these other people who don't have the science background gather the information. I think between the two of them, you actually have a realistic chance of determining what's going on.
That's
Put me in charge, that's what I would
That's
do.
an interesting concept. There certainly are enough crime scene investigation programs on TV to show people things that could be done there. Marty, we got anybody have any questions out there right out of the chute in this fascinating program with Ken Verderame?
No questions. I guess Ken is explaining things very well.
Well, okay, in the spirit of explaining one, let's go to my last chart then, because this is where I think we want to end up.
Okay.
So, if you want to go and study this phenomenon, okay, you can spend your whole life, trying to analyze these 5-second and 10-second snippet encounters and get nowhere, right? There's simply not enough data to be able to make conclusions about anything. Instead, why don't you focus, whoever you are, right? My team that I recommend, or this NASA group or somebody, or DoD, why don't you spend your time doing deep dives into what I will tell you are incidents that have a ton of data and have been researched for quite some time. These are incidents that they're not 5-second encounters. Mm-hmm. They encompass a bunch of eyewitnesses, in some case, hundreds of them. And there's lots of evidence in various forms to help try to make a conclusion. I've listed what I think are the 4 top ones in this area that, with the right kind of people, these additional some hardcore scientific expertise thrown on these, you might get a lot farther.
Roswell incident, misspelled there, by the way.
Sorry about that. So
everyone pretty familiar with that one.
I never claimed to be a spelling expert. Yeah. Sure. So Roswell, I think, is the one everybody knows. What I don't think a lot of people realize about Roswell is the amount of actual information that is factual, eyewitness, testimony, documented, Freedom of Information Act, documents that have been uncovered about this fact that, it was not a balloon. That is, the fact that this crash was not what the Air Force said it was, which was a weather balloon, is an absolute fact. Jesse Marcel.
He worked at Area 51, folks. Okay,
so and you don't need to believe me. If you'll do a little bit of research, you can read all these documents. These are government documents that have been released through the Freedom of Information Act that have been acquired by researchers that outline a trail of exactly what happened after Roswell. And in a nutshell, what happened is something crashed. The military went in, they retrieved material, and according to some of this information, including bodies, that material was transferred to a base in Texas, and then from Texas, it was transported again to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
There you have Dayton, Ohio.
Wright-Patterson. The documentation and the testimony from air crews and other people who were involved in that process along the way, I got to tell you, is irrefutable. Unless you're going to tell me that it's all a large cover-up and these 70 to 100 people that are part of this document trail are all lying and making up a story. Okay, is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Is it probable? No.
Not human nature,
right.
No.
Okay, and so that's why I put this one up as one of the credible ones that there's a ton of information. The next one, what's called the Westall UFO incident in Melbourne, Australia in 1966. I'll let you go look. This one is where a UFO, a craft, landed outside of what amounts to an elementary school Okay. And we're talking about over 100 witnesses, both teachers, adults, and children, witnessed this event. And you don't need to believe me. Again, all well documented. All their testimony has been recorded many times. You can go read it for themselves. Again, are these 100+ people all lying? Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Is it likely? No, nobody does that. Who makes up? It doesn't make any sense that these all are making up a story. Okay, so something happened to these people that was real.
Well, Ken, Cliff Watson is an astronomy buddy of mine in Pomona, Australia.
Oh, nice.
And on the west coast or east coast there. I'm sure Cliff knows about that. We want to say hi to Ron Roberts is watching. Space Monkey's watching. You know anybody named Space Monkey?
No.
Nickname, is that Pambo's nickname somewhere? Pam Melroy. Gary Gerald, he flies airplanes there. He's watching. He's a peanut farmer in Georgia there. Chris Callie's our artist. Hope you're fascinated with this, Chris. Maybe it's inspired you to, like your dad, do a UFO masterpiece there. Keith So, good to see you, buddy. Keith So is in our astronomy club. Remember Keith?
Yep, absolutely.
In there, David Haddad's watching, all right? Mikey Hahn, and we'll name off a couple others here. As you, the other two, I got to admit, I'm not familiar with that myself.
So the Rendlesham Forest incident in 1980, this is a military incident. This is Rendlesham Forest is where there was a combined UK, U.S. Air Force base. Nuclear weapons were there, and
nuclear weapons. Ooh.
Again, I won't go into all the details, but essentially what happened, and there is not only eyewitness documented testimony, they still have all the original audio radio conversations between the security team that witnessed this and reporting back to base what they were seeing in real time. So, did a bunch of Air Force guys make up this story that they saw this craft land and they saw at one point it was shining a beam of light down onto the ground? I mean, to listen to these guys, they should move to Hollywood because they're amazing actors, or they were witnessing something in real time that was real. It's a fascinating story as well documented, well known in the UFO research community. But again, outside of that, our friends wherever who are the debunkers would like to ignore it because there's too much evidence that they can't simply explain away. And then the last one is probably the best one of all. This is the most disturbing of any one of the ones I've ever looked at.
Really?
Okay. This happened in Brazil in 1996, so not that long ago. This one is, there's a recent video that was done called The Phenomena, I think, that has just been released a little while ago. It's just about this incident. Again,
the phenomenon. So you got that phenomenon word.
I think it's called Phenomenon. And the guy who did the movie, he went down to Brazil, and the reason the documentary is so well done is he doesn't make any conclusions. He doesn't try to explain anything. The documentary is an actual documentary of just talking to witnesses, holding up the microphone, and letting them tell their story. Okay? People living in the town, policemen, government officials, Brazilian military officials. Okay, the U.S. Air Force was involved. A radar operator at the local airport said that a U.S. Air Force cargo plane showed up after the incident and requested landing. They didn't have permission to land. Right? Those are clearances. We're going into a foreign country. You just don't arrive there and decide, I'm going to go land one day. There's procedures for doing all that. This airplane shows up. The guy knew they didn't have permission, and his supervisor said, let them land anyway. They landed. Long story short, the Air Force took possession of all the material, including the bodies, and left, and no one ever heard of it again. There was a X-ray technician working at a hospital, having a good old time, drinking his coffee, normal day. This entire military barrage of vehicles shows up. They literally close the hospital. They bring in a sealed bag, looks like a body bag. Okay, they bring it to this X-ray technician. They direct him to take a bunch of X-rays of, and they didn't open the bag. They put it on the machine, and they told him, I want one of this area, one of this, and they gave him the directions to get all these X-rays. Normally, he said his procedure is after he takes X-rays, is he reviews them to make sure that the quality is good enough that he can get to the doctor. They would not allow him to look at the X-rays. They simply took all the film and left. The X-ray technician and numerous personnel in the hospital said that the one thing besides that they remember is there was this, what they describe as a god-awful stench coming from that bag. They said the stench permeated the hospital and was so bad that they literally did not reopen that wing of the hospital for 5 days.
Whoa.
Because they could not get that smell out of that area of the hospital. There were 2 police officers from that town after the initial sighting of the UFO and the report that witnesses had seen aliens come out of the craft. This was 2 or 3 days after that. They were actually looking for these individuals. One of these police officers, they were in the car, 2 of them, they spot something crouching behind a wall. They go up to it. They take possession of this being, okay, and it was described as a small, bipedal creature that was maybe 4 foot or so. They put it in their vehicle. They drove around for what I believe was like 3 hours with this creature, with this being in the car with them. Again, long story short, after they had, and I don't off the top of my head remember the sequence after, I think he went to a hospital at one point because the creature was clearly in distress. And so they were going to hospital, and they went to the one, and one said, no, you can't come in here. We don't know what's going on, but you're not coming in here. Long story short, with that aspect of it, they eventually turned it over to the Brazilian military. That individual, that police officer, within several days, comes down with some kind of infection and dies.
Oh my gosh.
To this day, including the doctors who treated them, and there's all their testimony, no one has an explanation for what he died of. They never diagnosed what he died of.
Oh my God.
But he was in contact with this
creature.
So that particular episode, like I said, over 150 people from all walks of life or witnesses to this in various forms, military, both U.S. and Brazilian, hospital workers, doctors, police officers, regular citizens witnessing things. So unless you want to tell me, it's one of 2 things. It's either the greatest hoax ever done in mankind, encompassing hundreds of people for the better part of 25 years that pulled off this hoax,
Right.
or something extraordinarily happened there, and it's being covered up, and no one wants to talk about it. One of the things these documentarians did is they tracked down that police officer.
Yes.
The other one?
Yeah.
And he refused. In fact, they found that the mayor of the town where this happened said he knew where that police officer had ended up living, and he pointed them to where they went. That police, that gentleman, when they pulled up to his house, because now the guy doing the documentary doesn't speak Portuguese, so he had a translator with him, and he pulls up, and the guy's looking out the window, and he doesn't know who it is. He doesn't know if it's the guy he's looking for or whether it's just somebody else in the house. And the first words out of that guy's mouth said, "If you're here to talk about," and I don't remember the word he used. I want to say he may have said extraterrestrial. I'm not going to talk about it. Right? There was no question asked of him. That was the first word. So somebody tipped him off. They were coming, and he said, "I'm not going to talk about it." They talked. They got this on video in the film trying to talk to this guy. You can see him in the window. He's got a gun next to him, right? And he's like, "You people need to leave. I'm not going to talk to anybody." This guy was visibly shaken about whatever happened 25 years ago. Wants nothing to do with it. Doesn't want to talk to anybody about it. Just go away. Okay. Again, greatest actor on the planet, or something extraordinarily happened.
Yeah, I made a note of how people are affected years after all these events. They go back and interview them about how they affected you. And of course, one of my favorites that's not on your list is the story of Barney and Betty Hill, the interrupted journey, where a white woman and her black husband in 1966 or something like that called attention to themselves after undergoing therapy and thought they were abducted. And that's one that I always think has got a lot of effects to it, because they were an interracial couple in the 60s, and it wasn't that peaches and cream in Connecticut or wherever they were.
I mean, there are so many of these individuals who are involved in these experiences that are not interested in fame or money or anything else. In fact, when they come out with their encounters, they know that nothing good is going to come of it, yet they do it again. So again, what's the motivation for people making up stories?
Yeah,
right.
They don't get any financial reward, obviously.
It's one of the things that people say about Bob Lazar. Right? Oh, I don't believe Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar has had nothing good ever happen to him in the 35 years since he brought up the fact that he said he worked at Area 51 was reverse engineering propulsion systems, right? I mean, again, why would he lie about that stuff? He's never made a penny off it. In fact, he's gotten more, his life's become 10 times more miserable, not good, yet he's stuck by his story for 35 years, and it's never changed. So you need to look at not just what people are saying, but their motivation behind it. And while there are certainly people who are doing it for maybe obvious reasons, there are too many people that have nothing to gain by coming out, yet they come out and they tell about their encounters anyway. So again, it's black and white.
Yeah.
It's either a hoax or it's real. There's really only two possibilities. And too many of these, they can't be hoaxes. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, we hope Bill Whiting and Lisa Whiting's enjoying this. I know Doug Forrest is. He's just 10 miles from Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. You'll have to meet Doug when he comes to town again. Lloyd Franklin, thank you for watching. Of course, Tom and Mark Usiak, they got their tinfoil hats on there as they're watching you there, Ken. They're our photography buddies. They photographed over 70 shuttle launches together. Wow. They're in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Dave Stange, we'll get to your question here in a minute. Cynthia Ross. And Robert Law certainly was interested in that UK UFO there. He's up in Dundee, Scotland there. To wrap up this wonderful little conversation with Ken Verderame, who is an expert in all these things, I'm just going to quickly show a couple of the Tic Tacs, gimbals, and Go Fast that they show.
So look at this picture, people, okay? That is a picture from the back seat of an F-18. The crew member used his cell phone to take that picture, okay? So if you look at the left side picture, that's the image, at 1:1. And then the next picture is if you do some enhancement and you enlarge it. Someone want to tell me what that is? It don't look like any airplane I've ever flown.
Looks like a flying tick or something like that.
I mean, now, again, right, the debunker will tell you, well, that doesn't prove it's extraterrestrial. I didn't say it was extraterrestrial. Please tell me what it is, Mr. Debunker. And the answer is, I don't know either. And I said, well, there you go. That's why we got to keep doing this. No visible means of propulsion.
These are the things that you say we can see real details on. There's that classic one there. Here's what why these are anomalous, Ken.
Right. So these are the things you keep in mind. These are the things you focus on. Don't let the debunkers and people who don't believe in this confuse you with the facts, right? The things you need to focus on are these 5 things, right? Number 1, no visible means of propulsion. The things that the experts in this area, when they get concerned, are because they see an object that is clearly maneuvering in airspace, yet it has no visible means of propulsion. So please explain to me, you armchair experts out there, how is it doing that? Okay. Number two, it doesn't have any aerodynamic surfaces, right?
Rudders, flaps, those type of
I
things.
don't know how you maneuver in the atmosphere without aerodynamic surfaces. Please explain to me how you do that. I can't wait to learn how that physics works. Okay.
Because that's the way we've known to fly since the Wright brothers in 1903.
Right. So number three, acceleration rates exceeding hundreds of Gs.
Hundreds, you say?
That's not guesswork. That's verifiable by instrumentation, more of that uncalibrated instrumentation that NASA doesn't like. Well, I will tell you it is calibrated. It's radar data. It's FLIR data. It's from military aircraft. It's not that complicated to figure out acceleration rates. And some of these objects display accelerations literally in the hundreds of Gs. Two problems with that. Number one, I don't know how to do that with the system that we own. And number two, even if I could, you don't, right? You turn flesh to goo at 200 Gs. So that's a problem. Yet these things are exhibiting that behavior. Okay. Number four, demonstrate speeds in excess of what current tech is capable of in atmospheric flight. Okay, right? If you're familiar with the SR-71, that I'm sure a lot of people are, that's pretty much our top speed.
Blackbird.
Right? 30.
Retired, so to speak.
These vehicles demonstrate speeds in excess of that. Okay, please tell me what propulsion system they are using to do that, because we currently don't have anything that can do that. And then the last one is what we call trans-medium capability. Some of these objects demonstrate the capability to go from space to air to water, in a continuous activity. We don't have any vehicle that can translate between mediums like that. Yes, I mean, things like, say, well, submarine has a Polaris missile. No, it gets launched out of the water by one system, and then it lights its rocket engine, and then it goes. These vehicles, they translate between the three mediums as if the three mediums are continuous and have no different physical
Like a perfect diver doing a 10-point dive. No splash, no wake.
They go from space to air to water without any apparent difference in that medium.
Wow.
Okay, we don't know how to do that.
Wow. So there's only three sources.
Yeah. So as I've said more than once, you don't have many options in this one, right? Classified U.S. military technology is clearly an option. Advanced military or advanced technology from one of our adversaries, obviously an option. And then the only other one is not Earth, right? It's alien technology. I don't know what other options. If someone's got another option, I'd love to hear it. But I think those are really the only three broad categories when you understand that these are physical objects. They're not natural phenomena. Sorry, NASA study team. They're real objects here. Some subset of them are, and we need to understand more about them.
So we're right back to little green men.
Or women, or maybe not men or women, but some kind of entity that's not a natural, necessarily just a natural phenomenon.
Well, something that was harped on, and I do mean talked quite a bit, was that they were looking for a needle in a haystack. You remember that old adage kept coming up. And that the culture of scientists was talked about, where they're rebellious of nature, not believing in convention, and kept claiming that they don't want to hide anything. That's not our nature, these panel members were saying. But one of the more important things brought out was Carl Sagan's famous statement of the astronomer that popularized astronomy with Cosmos on PBS in the 70s. Sagan said extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, Ken.
Yeah.
Is this group going to be able to provide the extraordinary evidence?
No. And
no. Well, wait a minute. Let me.
Well, and so in fairness to this group, right, their charter is not to do that. Their charter is a subset of that, which is to recommend methods for collecting data to get the evidence, which is fine. But I'll go back to what I believe they're focused on is simply natural phenomena, not any other kind of physical object. They seem to believe that all the instrumentation and sensors can be focused on collecting data that will eventually point to the fact that these are physical phenomena that are novel and as yet unknown, unexplained, but we are scientists and that's what we do. We explain the natural world around us. And I'm said, yeah, that's all well and good, but there's another part of this that you've already discounted, which is what if it's not simply natural phenomena? How are you going to explain it? Well, we're not going to explain it because we're not going to look at it because we're not going to collect any data because we've already discounted it.
Wow.
My bottom line is shame on you. You should not be doing that. That's not the way scientists operate.
Well, here's from a man that helped put the X-37B space plane in orbit there when it was an X-40. Ken, I really appreciate your insight there. And I know everybody's been hanging on, listening to your every word there. Dave Stangy's one of our top fans up there in Michigan. He wanted to ask you about the book. Some of you've read it. I've not read this one. Area 51, An Uncensored History of America's Top Secret Military Base by Annie Jacobson.
Yep.
You punched a paycheck out there at Area 51, I guess. Did she work out there? And,
No.
and what's your opinion of that book?
So Annie Jacobson is an interesting investigative journalist. She's very good at what she does. She's got quite a few good books. Quite frankly, I would recommend if you're interested in these kinds of topics, Area 51, the CIA, all sorts of things the government has been involved in over the years. Her books are extraordinarily well researched, and she gets access to the people who were doing whatever the job was at the time and gets them, in some cases, I think, to divulge information they probably shouldn't. But most of the stuff, by and large, has been unclassified or declassified, and she goes in and digs it out and puts together a comprehensive story. She's done that with the Area 51 book as well. It's a great book. It is. I will tell you that, except for the last 7 pages,
Okay.
I did not see anything in the entire book that was not correct, that was not factual. It's that good a book.
Okay.
I would be careful when I read the last 7 pages. Now, in her defense, the last 7 pages, and I won't spoil it for you if you want to go buy the book, it's kind of, she is recounting something one of her sources is telling her. So it's not her conclusion. It's not her saying, I think I've done A, B, and C, and it's clearly this is what's going on. It's simply she's recounting the story that she got one of her sources to tell her when she asks some very specific questions about certain things. And the certain thing I will tell you was Roswell. Okay? So I'll give you that much of information. But this source gave her some information about the Roswell crash. It's not true. I can tell you it's not true, but I'll let you go read it. It's still interesting, and that does not. The rest of her book is fabulous. It's well worth going to read. It's an accurate history of Area 51.
Well, I believe, Ken, you've that's awesome.
And I don't get any
And thank
kickback
you,
from
Dave.
Annie
Yeah,
for
Dave.
telling her books. Okay,
Yeah.
so just
Well, I believe you there, buddy, for sure in there. And we want to, I just got to give a shout out. This is a buddy of mine, Bob Smith. This is an actual billboard up in northeast Tennessee, for the Mutual UFO Network, advertising the truth is out there. Of course, that's been a mantra for TV shows and so forth. But they really, this committee just does not even want to consider what researchers like MUFON and all these people that legitimately,
Right.
not in anything of our society, you're going to have a fringe group of people that
Sure.
don't look at the facts or don't let the fact get in the way of my opinion type of thing, but not MUFON and some of
Right.
these other things
Nope.
in there. And they just completely discount them as being not worthy of even consideration of here from 1947 to 1996, various things that have been seen all over the world.
I mean, I don't know, right, what the NASA administrators' initial reason for pulling together this panel was. I'll assume it was a genuine interest in applying NASA expertise and resources to the question. I don't doubt that he was sincere in wanting to do that. I'm disappointed in that the committee themselves has gone in a direction which has done a huge disservice to trying to uncover what's going on here. I think NASA could have a very valuable role in helping uncover what's going on, but you got to be focused on the right kinds of things. And I don't think the committee's going to recommend. They're going to only recommend, disproving the negative. Oh, it's a just natural phenomena. Well, what about the other part of it? Why do you literally refuse to acknowledge that you should collect data on that and make that a focus area? And there are ways to do that to help try to find out what's really going on.
Well, Ken, we can't thank you enough. When I told Marty that I was going to be watching this UFO thing, and the boss, Karan, Conklin, our executive director, both of them said, "You're going to get your UFO guy on the show to talk about the real stuff." And you certainly have, Ken, in a very pragmatic and intellectual way. Ken, just really appreciate all that you do. There you are, just proof again that Ken has been there, okay? Marty, thank you.
That's an undisclosed location that we will not confirm or deny.
Just a couple, you and a couple, 3 friends there.
A couple of friends that I met along the way.
That's right. Well, buddy, I sure am glad and proud to meet you along the way of my life journey here. You're an outstanding individual, a real Renaissance man out there, and boy, does he lay the astronomy on you out there when we're looking at the stars too. We have a lot of fun, don't we, with that?
We do, and let me just say that I really appreciate. I always look forward when you call and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming back?" I'm thrilled to come back. It doesn't matter what the topic. I mean, this is obviously a specific interest area of mine, but it doesn't matter what the topic is. I'm always glad to come, and these podcasts are fun to do.
Well, thank you, Ken. We will have you back and do some of your other programs. There you are. Let's see what NASA does with this committee. Ken and I will be watching. We'll certainly have him back here on Stay Curious. I believe they're due to do a report every July. That
will be an interesting report to read on what they actually recommend are the methods for collecting, because maybe we can poke at them and say, hey, you can do that in physical phenomena, but it's also good for collecting this kind of data as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Ken, again. Marty, we had a good Streamlabs hour there after we had some hiccups, and we had a lightning flash that knocked us off air. So we have a startup of about 10 minutes, and then we just did the whole show again. Ken, thank you for putting up with that. So, Marty, thank you. Anything else we need to say to our friends watching this fascinating show on unidentified aerial phenomena with Ken Verderame? Well, everybody, thank you again. And tomorrow's Thursday. We'll get into the shuttles of the month of June and look up some space history for you, and hope that you come back to watch our program. I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.